This is not sponsored by Hintastic, but I do say they make a hell of product. No, you're fine. You love this. The day is finally here. We are putting together this piece. This video is 3 weeks in the making. So we started, let's rewind the clock a little bit. We started with us making the head. The second video was us making the talons. So the third video and the final video is us gonna be putting those talons on a glass antler, closing the claws around that antler so it looks like it's grass. Jesus. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take the 2 talons out of the garage and we're gonna put them on a glass antler. We're gonna wrap those fingers around it and it's gonna be really cool, really gnarly. And then we're gonna put that in the garage. Next, we're gonna make the tail. We're gonna put that in the garage. Then we're gonna blow a body, a glass bubble. We're gonna open it from the inside. We're gonna go in with bent tools and we're gonna push out muscle and bone structure of the bird's body. After that, we're going to add the tail. We're gonna punny it, we're gonna close that bubble back up, we're gonna add the head to the top, and then we're gonna take that antler with those 2 talons, and we're gonna push them into the whole thing. Hopefully it works. You know, sometimes things could be a little off, but you just have to go for it sometimes. You'll just have to watch till the end to see how it turns out, but let's have some fun. Let's roll the clip. Roll it. Welcome back. Welcome for part 3 of us putting together the Vulture. This has been a journey for sure. So here we are. Where we last left off, we had just made the talons. So I made a glass antler for us to put those talons on. So at this point, I've made the antler and we are bringing those talons out of the garage. Now, they never left the initial pipe they were made on, and we're just heating up that antler just to make it a little hot, a little sticky for us to add these feet to. We don't want to get it too hot because then it'll distort the form, and we don't want that to happen. So once we get these talons on here, the next step is to kind of push them on very gently. I'm using it's kind of like a wet, it's not wet, but it's a newspaper pad. So I like to use this just so I don't use metal to actually push on the glass, because metal tends to be cold and that'll chill the glass and possibly break it. So the way we're doing this is we're heating up each individual toe, and then I have my assistant flash it, and after that flash is soaked into the piece, then when it comes out, we're able to push on it a little bit and just coax it over the antler. Now, if we tried to get this whole thing super hot and then move it, we probably would move the whole antler. So what we wanted to do was just do the talons over the piece, and that's how you get that illusion of it actually grabbing and really putting some weight on those antlers. So we've got all the toes wrapped around this antler. Now I'm just kind of bringing back the heel of each piece. As you can see, even though I'm taking light flashes to the point where a hard bonk on this bench could break the piece off, the antler is still moving a little bit. So I'm being very careful to not do that too much. So here we are, we heated up the antler, and now we're putting in the final bend. I didn't want to put the bend of the antler in before adding the feet because I was afraid that it would get in the way of us actually putting the feet on and bending the toes over, having to go around a bent curve. So now that that piece is done, that's going to go into the garage, and it will stay there until the end of the piece. So the garage is a place for you to keep things warm. It stays at around 1,000 degrees, and literally garage just for like parking a piece. So now we're going to start the tail. The tail was about 2 gathers of clear glass, and then we rolled it in black powder just to coat it up. I did about 3 coats. Unfortunately, I was unable to get the flattening part. What I did was I flattened it, and then I cut it, and then I flattened again. So you've joined us here on the second flattening. So I just get it ripping hot as my assistant is comfortable getting it, and then we go for it. Right here, we're shaping the piece. I found through a lot of trial and error that the best time to actually shape the tail is not when it's on the final bird body, because at that point it's really stressful, and you don't really want to have to be worrying about trying to get the tail to bend and getting that heat introduced. I'm adding a jack line, and I use my shears quite a bit to do that. So now it's time to start the body. We're bringing over some color. We're just putting that over a clear bubble and pushing that back. And this piece will be probably about, I think it was like 3 or 4 gathers. didn't have a strip bucket, so we just stripped right there. Of course, removed it very quickly so that it wouldn't hurt the concrete. And then we're going to go over to the pipe cooler and just chill the pipe. I find that it's it's very helpful to actually take the time to chill the pipe instead of going right to the bench. So here we are now. We're shaping the glass using some wooden block tools, using some newspaper to get that bubble into shape. I like to take my time, and then I like to reheat the piece so that it's an even heat around the bubble, just to have the best chance of an even blowout. So after that was set up, we reintroduced some heat to it, and now we're putting color on the outside. Now you might be asking, why did you put color on the inside and color on the outside? Well, what tends to happen when you powder something on the outside, and especially when you don't have a powder booth — they unfortunately did not have a powder booth — is the powder becomes very transparent. As the bubble blows up, the opaqueness goes away. So by adding a color bar underneath and then powdering it, it guarantees that this piece will stay the color that I want. So we've blown up the bubble, we've added the jack line. I noticed that the piece isn't long enough, so while we still have that core heat, I'm using gravity, just letting it swing out a little bit and elongate. And after that, it's back to the bench, and now we're corking it. So while we still have pressure, because it's still a closed bubble, I'm using those corks. Of course, my assistant is capping it, and we are shaping this into the initial bird body that it's going to become. I'm not trying to get super detailed. I'm just trying to get like a basic shape. So we've got the tungsten now, tungsten metal, and we're going to actually open a hole. So when you make holes in glass, the key is to have the hot tungsten and cold glass. It seems opposite, but it's the way to do it. So once we've got the hole in there, it's now time to start sculpting the inside. So what I've started to do, and I kind of edited out, it was introduce some heat into the shoulders, because it's a very slow process. And then we've gone inside the bubble, and I have these bent tools with balls on the end, and we're literally pushing out the bone structure. So introducing the heat. And what I always tell my students is that you want to heat it probably twice and then do the move. You know, if you heat it once, flash, and then try to do it, most of the times that's not enough heat to actually do what you want. So heating that up, flashing it, and then going back in and now pushing it out. And it's kind of hard to see. This is black glass, so it had a black core with black powder on the outside, and we're pushing it out. You can kind of see on the left side the bubbles start to get stretched out. Here we are adding, this will become the leg bumps, I like to call them. So heating up the middle of that bubble and then pushing up. And this is also key. It took me so long to figure this out, like where do I punny this bird when I'm making it? And the key was honestly pushing up these leg bumps to kind of give me a platform from where I can actually punny this piece, because I'm going to have to work the other side, and that's where the head will be attached later on. So you can start to see the form. It's starting to come in. I always tell my students that if it starts to look like a rotisserie chicken, you're on the right track. So we're pushing up those bumps, and now we're actually pushing up that chest cavity a little bit. Wanted to show this part because we are maxing out this reheating chamber, this glory hole. So now once we have the basic shape down, I like to go in and do the texture. Most of the time I do the texture last. It's one of the things I enjoy at the very end of the process, but because this thing is going to be like at a 45-degree angle punny, it's heavy, it's going to be awkward, I'm going to try to get as much of that texture in right now as possible. So now it's time to add the tail. The tails come from the garage. We always take it from the garage, flash it in the glory hole, and then bring it right over to me. And I've got that piece pretty hot where it's going to land. So we take a flash on that. And then I'm going to just come back and use the corks. I'm not going to press on it with any steel. I'm going to press on it with the cork, something that's soft, something that's not cold. And I'm just really just making sure that that tail is pushed into that body bubble. So we've got the body, we've got the tail attached. Now it's time to do the punny. I always do a cold core sculpture punny when I do these kind of things. You've spent a really long time making all these parts, and everybody's put so much effort in. It'd be a real tragedy to just not make a punny well enough, or something that what you normally would just pop off. So these sculpture punnies, they don't come off until I'm ready for them to come off. They're very large, and so we go on. I never touch the tip of that punny to the marver. So when I'm marvering it, the hot is still pretty juicy where it's going to actually contact the glass. Because I actually have had some problems with black powder in the past where for some reason it rips off the piece. So I always want to make sure that's a very hot connection. So I'm using the tag here. I'm pushing down on that punny, and like I'm really making sure that it's attached to the form. And then I'm going around, I'm using the edge of the tag, and I'm just starting to cut a jack line in. Chuck over here is bringing in some air just to cool it down a little bit. And I wanted to make sure that it has somewhat of a jack line, but I'm not really cutting it in because I can do that later. So remove it from the other pipe. We go to this glory hole, and I kind of had a feeling because of the angle that this piece is at, it won't fit in this glory hole. So we were ready for this, and we switched to the furnace, which is still very tight. It's just that because of the angle that you have to punny this piece, it puts it at that weird 45, and it spins larger than it actually is. So here we are reheating the piece, and it's important that after you do the punny, you can get a good heat on it. But it's also a very tricky time because that punny is still juicy. So here we are. We're balancing it out. I'm letting that punny set up. I really just want to make sure that it's got a good core, and then it's time to put this tungsten hole in, because even though that bubble is open at the other end where it broke off from the initial blowpipe, we're going to close that off, and we're going to need to have some relief pressure in there. So the tungsten is put in a spot where you won't see it. When I first started, for some reason, I did it on the back of its wings, and it's like there's a big hole on its back. So don't do that. Don't do that. So now we're introducing the heat into the head of the bird. It doesn't look like a head, but that's actually going to be like its neck. So I'm just using the corks, and I'm rounding that out, and then just shaping that a little bit. And unfortunately, I didn't get the head, but the head was on its original pipe, and then we brought it over, and I grabbed it, and I just stuck it on. We broke it off that, and I just stuck it on there. So, and what's a really cool trick, and I don't believe they were able to video it, but that tungsten hole, you can put a little copper pipe to it and blow into it, and you can inflate where that head went into the neck, and that'll kind of bring it back out and kind of give it some fluff. So at this point, we're now prepping for where the antler claws will go. So I want to make sure it has a really great heat. Having my assistant like stay on that moil, stay on that tail, because those are the parts that are going to break or crack. Mainly the tail is what I'm mostly concerned about. That punny is a beast, but you just never want to have cracks if you can help it. So the antlers come out of the garage. We've got everything ready to rock and roll. I've asked my assistant to add a little bit of water to it where it's going to break off, but I told him not to hit it till I'm ready. So I've heated it. I've got my glove ready. This is really a cool move, just bonking the pipe, and then it releases, and then that thing is still ripping hot, and just pushing that in and making sure it doesn't come in contact with that punny, because if it comes in contact with the punny, we're going to have a real problem. So now that that's in, I want to make sure that we can get that flashed pretty quickly, because it was a really fragile piece. So, of course, now we've maxed out the furnace almost with how big this piece is, and luckily we've got Devin on the shield just to help with the heat for Chuck. Coming on out, showing everybody, holding it up. Really cool moment. I'm making sure everything is staying okay and lit. I've got this wood paddle here, and it's not that I just wanted to grab the wood paddle. Why didn't I grab the tweezers? It's because I wanted to make sure to push it around with something that isn't cold, not steel. So I'm heating the end of that antler where it broke off from the pipe because it still had a rough edge. I'm going around. I'm hitting the tail again. I'm really worried about the tail. The tail is wanting to stay cold. I'm having Chris get on that with the torch, make sure that's all lit, going up and down the antler, going all around. I'm telling him to get more underneath the tail. I'm a little concerned about it. And then we're just pretty much going around and equalizing and getting everything that is delicate. So then we go back in. We're flashing for one of our final flashes. Chuck is holding it up. And I've got the piece spinning here so you guys can check it out and enjoy it. And again, just evening out everything, making sure everything is balanced. You don't want to bonk it off where something is still moving or something has gotten really cold. We're just trying to make sure everything is as even as possible, because this bubble, it's a bubble, so it's hollow, and then we've got a solid head, we've got solid feet, the antler solid, the tail solid, so we've got a lot of different things going on. So now here's the point of adding the water. I've got someone ready on the jacks. We'll put that right on the jack line. I accidentally put a little bit of water on that tail, but we can't flash it again, so we have to go for it. Putting that on the rail, ready to catch it, and then just a couple light bonks with the wood, and boom, it comes right off. Yeah, baby. No problem. And just a quick run to the annealer, cradle it like a baby. Someone's ready. I always say have all the doors open. Too many times pieces have been broken by just loading them because the other door was not opened enough. So here's like the final moments. It's just a team effort, just a wonderful moment, and just want to thank everyone at Georgia State Southwestern University for having me, and yeah, it was just awesome. That's how it is, guys. Thank you for watching all the videos and seeing the entire process through. If you like what you've seen, please subscribe, or if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer them. And just, you know, have fun with it, and you know, you don't have to obviously make a vulture out of this, but you can, there's definitely like tons of little information that you could take, little tidbits here and there, and make your own type of animal that's completely different from the inside sculpting we were doing to the solid sculpting to the texturing. You know, these can apply all across the whole spectrum of sculpture. So guys, just keep those fires lit, and I'll see you next time. Later. Oh, so now you want to be here. Now you want to be here. Now you want to be here. Jesus, just get out of here. Get out of here.